Hello everyone, welcome to today's Halloween review. Today's review is a look at the movie Carnival of Souls, starring Candice Higgins. The movie made no real splashes at the time of its initial release. However, its cult popularity grew when its rights were handed over to over 180 TV stations who would run and rerun it during late night TV for the better part of a decade. And the movie went on to inspire major film hits like Night of the Living Dead, The Sixth Sense, and Insidious. By now you must be thinking, this must be one amazing film. Well, let's get into the synopsis and review to find out. The movie begins with two cars on the road, one with 3 women and the other with 2 men. The men challenge the ladies to a drag race and both cars fly down the road. They come to a bridge and both cars speed over it, vying for the first space when the men start to hit their car into the women's. The car the women are in is sent through the bridge rails and into the water below. As police and rescue volunteers begin to arrive, dragging the lake, people notice one of the girls pull herself out of the water. The sole survivor is Mary Helen, the movie's protagonist. The movie skips forward a week where Mary is playing an organ, and we find out she has accepted a job at a church to play the organ there. We also find out that she sees playing the organ as just a job, and playing it for a church has no more meaning to her than playing anywhere else. It's just a paycheck to her. As she leaves and begins to drive to the town her new job is in, she begins to see visages of phantasms in her window, and panics when she sees a ghoulish man standing in the road in front of her car. She chalks up the images to a lack of sleep. When she arrives in the town, she's given direction to a boarding house where she will be living. She unpacks, then heads to the church she'll be playing for to meet its preacher. When she arrives, she begins to practice and doesn't finish till a few hours later. The preacher offers to give her a ride while he goes to an appointment. They stop by an old carnival that Mary saw while driving in. Mary wants to go in, but the preacher refuses. When Mary returns home, her landlady offers to make her a sandwich after Mary's done with her bath. Mary agrees and goes upstairs. After the bath, Mary hears a knock at the door and tells her landlady to come in, only to find the person knocking is Mr. Linden, the other tenant in the boarding house. Mr. Linden asks her to go out to dinner, but Mary informs him that she's already made plans to eat in. When Mr. Linden leaves, Mary sees the ghoulish man at the bottom of the stairs, staring at her as he begins to ascend the steps. Mary races back into her room and shuts the door until the doorknob turns and the landlady announces her arrival with Mary's meal. The next day, Mary goes shopping and has a strange experience where all of the sound leaves the world and no one seems to acknowledge her presence. She finds herself in a park and sounds begin to come back. As she goes to take a drink of water from a water fountain, the ghoulish man reappears, sending Mary into a panic. A doctor stops her and takes her to his office where he tries to figure out the problem. Mr. Linden stops Mary when she arrives home and tries to ask her out again to no avail. And the next day, Mary returns to the church to practice the organ. As she plays, she has visions of dead people dancing and walking out from the lake, and her music changes from gospel harmonies to something more sinister. The preacher calls the music sacrilege and fires her. When Mary returns home, Mr. Linden is there to ask her out again, and she accepts. The date doesn't go well as Mr. Linden complains about Mary's unenthusiastic manner and Mary insisting she wants to be with him on the date. Eventually, the pair return to Mary's room. While Mary checks herself in the mirror, she sees the ghoulish man in the reflection and screams, beginning to panic once more, and she angers Mr. Linden, who then leaves. Mary's panic has her take her car out the next day to a shop where she once again believes someone's coming for her. She runs off and begins to have another episode where the world goes silent and no one acknowledges her for hours this time. She tries to find any way out of town and eventually comes to a bus station. The clerk doesn't seem to hear or see her, but she does hear an announcement for a bus preparing to leave, so she makes a dash for it. The bus ends up being filled with maniacal-looking people in robes who chase after her. Eventually, Mary wakes up and realizes that the episode was all a dream. The movie cuts to Mary ranting about the problems to the doctor who rescued her earlier. When she asks him what to do, the chair swivels around to reveal the ghoulish man. Mary runs screaming from the office and gets in her car, driving to the abandoned carnival where she has been drawn to since seeing it. When she arrives at the carnival, she stumbles across a large group of the same phantasmic individuals dancing. The ghoulish man is dancing with a phantasm version of Mary. Mary screams and runs with the pack of ghouls following her. She stumbles in the sand and the pack overwhelms her. The scene cuts to show a group of men retracing Mary's steps and conclude that the patch of disturbed sand is where the trail ends. The scene jumps once more to some more men trolling the river the car Mary had been in when it went into the water is found. After finding the car and using a tow truck to pull it out of the river, the camera zooms in and shows the 3 drowned women, one of whom is Mary. And thus ends the movie. I admit that when I first saw the movie when I was younger, I found it to be a pretty dry movie that never really captured me. And to be honest, that opinion hasn't changed very much. I can appreciate the story and both the psychological and supernatural events that happen to Mary a lot more now though. But that doesn't mean that the movie isn't kind of bland in its delivery. But what's to be expected on a budget that would make a shoestring budget look like the funding for the entire MC universe combined, especially for the time frame when the movie was filmed? It does nothing especially well, and the only standout moment is the very end, and you probably guessed that about 3 minutes into the movie. Its popularity comes from being rerun for over a decade on nearly 200 TV stations. Anything can become popular when replayed that much. Just look at basically any Black Eyed Peas song ever. Its legacy lives on primarily in the movies it inspired, and not in anything it did particularly well. Still, it's a good enough movie to recommend seeing if you're curious about movies that inspire other movies. That will wrap up today's review. I hope you all enjoyed it. If you did, please give the video a like. If not, give it a dislike and let me know why in the comments. I hope you all have a great day, and as always, stay positive.